Hey guys, this is SoundJack from Nerdy Geek Talk, the source for all your nerdy geeking needs, here with episode 2 of Misaligned, the podcast talking about all the lore related to the Aligned continuity. And with me today, we have _Zeus.
Hey, before we get started, I just have one thing I'd like to say. Last week, I made a couple comments about me not thinking that the show was run super well and that we didn't communicate all that well. I'd just like to retract that. This is something I'm doing on my own. I am not at all being forced to do this by Eric. He's not holding me hostage and forcing me to inform you of this. Please don't misinterpret this as me being held hostage by Eric and track me down to try to save me.
Okay.
Second thing, unfortunately, due to some issues with schedules and just not being able to come on because he doesn't have the time, we've lost Aaron from this show, so we're not going to be able to do our battle to the death as I had planned on doing last week because he didn't show up. So instead, we've got Miguel. How's it going, Miguel?
Doing pretty well.
Yep. So if you may have noticed, Jared is not here this week. Unfortunately, he cannot be here this week. He will be back. Aaron, who we mentioned would be on the podcast, will not, unfortunately, be on the podcast at any point. But Miguel is here to fill this out, so it's just not just me and Zeus by ourselves, because you saw how well that went last time.
We need someone to help keep this all on track.
I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You had one job, Miguel.
And it seems like he's already failing it. Anyway, let's get into what we are talking about today. Last week we talked about the first 3 chapters of the Covenant of Primus, all of which involved the Primes, specifically going over the Primes themselves, their battle against Unicron, and the war between the Primes. I do encourage you to go watch that before you watch this one, since everything's going to be in chronological order. The next thing we are going to be looking at are the next 2 chapters of the Covenant of Primus, Chapter 4, The Age of Evolution, and Chapter 5, The Age of Origins. So, Miguel, you want to start us off a little bit with going on with what the first bit of the Age of Evolution chapter is?
Alright, so the Age of Evolution starts pretty much after the 13th Prime and 2 the other Primes, Onyx and Micronus, dive into the well. So this chapter starts with all of the different life that starts populating Cybertron emerging from the Well of Allsparks, and the other Primes observing this and seeing how Cybertron starts to change, ushering in sort of the transition from the age of the Primes.
Yeah, pretty succinct, very solid start to the chapter. Very interesting that there's a lot of mayhem going on with the planet involved with this transformation, if you will.
I'd also like to say that this story is very ahead of its time because it's got a beam of light shooting up into the sky, which is something that, if anyone has seen any Marvel movie, you've probably seen that happen when the villain does his big evil plan.
Yeah, but this was a good thing this time, because...
Arguably, it did create the Decepticons.
Okay, not intentionally. Geez, you sound like Unicron. You'd rather just destroy all life rather than let it flourish and prosper.
Hey, who said I wasn't Unicron?
I did, because I can see you, even though the audience can't, and you're human.
That's what you think. Maybe this is just my meat suit. We're derailing again.
Yes, we are. Anyway, so the big beam of light that shot out apparently across the entirety of the galaxy to the edge of, the entire universe, getting all the way to the edge of the universe. And what happened with that was the Triptych Mask was apparently scanning all life in the universe and to inform and shape the creation of the new life that Cybertron was going to be creating. And this happened in waves to an extent. As stated, it started with smaller creatures first. The largest of them in the first wave were about up to the knees of the Primes, if I recall correctly from the book itself. Following that, we got different varieties, larger animals, and then we got the main, what would become the dominant species of the planet, the bipedal humanoids. Which is weird to say because they are so much older than humans.
So, bipedal Cybertronianoids?
But that doesn't make any sense because these are the first of the shape.
It's a mouthful, too!
It is. It is very true. But there's a very important individual that the other primes, notably Alpha Trion, recognizes stepping out of the well. Miguel, do you want to tell us who that individual was or is?
The 13th Prime, who had emerged into the well and was reborn as one of these new humanoid life forms, or Cybertronians, as they may or may not be eventually called.
And what is the name of the 13th Prime?
I mean, I wasn't on the first episode. Did we blow this already?
No, we did not blow this. This has been completely secretive up until this point.
Oh, then I'm gonna operate as if people haven't read the book or have gone onto the wiki and found out for themselves.
Also, we might have mentioned it at some point in one of our headcanons.
No, we were saying that was in our headcanon, it was Autonomous Maximus, which the Aspector Prime had mentioned could have been a possible 13th Prime.
You did?
I think.
I thought I said something different. Okay, anyways.
I'm gonna say Zeus is the 13th Prime.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. It would explain why there's this weird glowing rock in my chest.
Although you're also Unicron, so how does that work?
Don't question it. Miguel.
He never explained what color
Prime?
the glowing rock was. It could just be a shard of dark energon.
Alright, great. Somehow I ended up being the one who didn't completely derail us in this conversation.
Anyway, Miguel, who is...
Y'all are taking my job.
Anyway, Miguel, who is the 13th Prime?
Can I blow it, or...?
Yeah, blow it. The
book
book blows it
ahead.
at this point.
Alright. As if you read up to the end of the Covenant of Primus, you'll find out that the 13th Prime, as far as the aligned continuity is concerned, is, in fact, Optimus Prime.
Yes, it is,
Okay.
who at this current time is only known as Orion Pax.
Alright.
But
So,
obviously, if you know that Optimus... if you know aligned continuity, you know Optimus Prime was once Orion Pax, and you'd very make the connection, what? Optimus is the 13th Prime? If you didn't, I don't know.
alright.
I don't know what to say to that, if you did not get that.
So, does that close out the, what's basically just like the creation myth then?
The only other notable... There's a couple of other notable things, like mainly two. Besides that, it is noted that the T-Cog, Amalgamis's T-Cog, is inside all the Cybertronians. However, the remaining primes decide not to tell the new life that they have it, which comes back to bite them in the butt later on, and we'll get to that later on in this episode, so stay tuned for that. And the other thing is that the well was not done creating after they created the bipedals, and the species became larger and even more monstrous, eventually creating the Predacons, most notably Predaking, who, if you watch the Prime cartoon, you should know about.
So then that's the creation myth?
Yes, that's pretty much the creation myth, and everyone's just like,
Okay,
yeah.
Great, because this time I actually have some constructive notes that I've taken. Once again, of my own choice, not at all being forced by my kidnapper, Eric. I mean, my not kidnapper.
Yeah, it's a very great ruse that he's currently listening to the Radio Free Cybertron right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric, put the belt away. I'm about to start. I mean, what? Yeah, okay. So anyways, this is different from the other Hi, words, please work. This is different than most of the other creation myths across the continuities. The first one that was ever put to paper, I guess, is the one from the Marvel G1 continuity, where the Transformers were formed from naturally occurring gears, levers, and pulleys, which is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, those atheists.
Alright. Moving on from this controversial opinion.
Okay, I say that with full knowledge I am an atheist, just so you're aware.
Okay, so, yeah, anyways. In the G1 cartoon, the Transformers were all created by the Quintessons, which we'll get back to, I think, next week.
No.
Get back to more of that.
Well, yeah, a little bit. right now, but
and a
mostly
little bit at the end of this week, right?
Yeah.
And in the Marvel UK comic, which I think eventually retconned the G1, the Marvel G1 comic,
Mm-hmm.
it was in the US, they all grew off of the surface of Primus after he had turned himself into a planet, which in my notes I have written it as a comparison to a potato growing off of another potato. So good on me for writing down this very important note here.
Primus is a potato. Confirmed.
Cybertronians originally just transform into potatoes. Confirmed.
Right, yeah. Another important note about this is that this, or some version of this, ended up becoming a universal constant, where basically Primus created all the original Cybertronian life, which, you know, if you listened to last week's episode, you would know that's how life was created. And then I think in pretty much every other version of the Transformer story, this exists in some way. It's different. Sometimes he creates Cybertronians, sometimes he creates the 13 Primes. In the case of IDW, Primus split himself into 5 beings who were the guiding hand, and each one of them created a part of the Transformer body and the way that they worked. Like, one of them I know created the T-Cogs, one of them did sparks or something. I think one of them turned into the Matrix.
Yes. The main things were the 5 were Primus himself, Solimus, Epistemus, Adaptus, and Mortalis.
Mortalis is the one who died, and that's why Transformer Sparks can't die.
Yes. Yeah, because he was the personification of death, so Transformers, quote unquote, can't die naturally at the very least.
Right.
Because
in continuity, this is treated as an actual myth.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we don't know whether or not this is actually true.
Yep.
And then in the Bay movies, there's literally no continuity to how they're made. It changes with every new movie. At one point it was the Allspark, then it was they put dinosaurs on the Earth, and it was made by the Quintessons or something, and then in the new one, Space Witch made them.
Well, okay. The Allspark, they don't know where it came from, so maybe the Quintessons made it? Maybe Quintesson made the Allspark? That is the main creation myths across the universes. The only other notable one is that the Allspark was also responsible for the animated universe, and there's nothing to contradict that.
Yep, because the animated universe is solid through and through, because they don't have that many stories to tell, which is disappointing, because animated is still my favorite Transformers series of all time.
It is wonderful. But Prime is also very wonderful, but we'll get to that later. We got a lot of Aligned stuff to get through.
Yep.
Miguel, do you have any other comments about the creation myths?
I do like how in both the Aligned continuity and sort of since now the IDW creation myths are sort of borrowing from the IDW continuity, in some respects Primus takes a less direct role. Like the Marvel origin where like they sort of budded from Primus's surface. A lot of other variations have sort of adapted from it, like in the Unicron trilogy. They usually like talked about how like Primus was their deity and sort of their progenitor. So having sort of muddying up the creation myths or having him take a less active role, like in the Aligned and eventually in IDW, is really interesting to see. So that's something I certainly do really love about the Covenant, that we really get this blueprint of how the creation story in-universe actually happened.
Yeah, it is very nice, very nice. Also, I don't think I clarified it I don't think it was clarified when described. All of this shooting up of energy and creation of life came directly from the Well of All Sparks.
I had that in my notes too. I meant to mention that. That's at the top.
Just a note as to differentiate it from like the Marvel UK stuff where they just like melted out of the world.
They potato butted, SoundJack.
Yeah,
they potato butted.
Yeah, out of the world. Just to make that clear.
Just for the record, this whole episode is giving me like 10 different ideas for t-shirt designs, so stay tuned for that in a few years when I learn how to draw.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Titan Claws Primus is just going to be a sack of potatoes.
Eric, get on it. Design Primus as a potato, please.
All right.
Is it sad? Is it sad? I want to get some potatoes and glue them together into the general shape of Primus.
Yeah. So what happened after the creation myth? Let's get back to something that's.
So they lived, the new life lived, they developed ecosystems, and then boom, everything died.
Just like the Earth.
Yeah. Basically, what happened was that the star that Cybertron was orbiting about got too close to another star, and there was a whole lot of gravitational flux going on. And the two main things that happened was like they had their own asteroid belts. I forget what they call it. The debris belts, which is beyond their fifth planet. I think they said Cybertron's the third planet in their star system. I can't remember. Anyway, the debris belt, a lot of the rocks are shifted and things start raining into Cybertron. So meteor impacts abound, and then the sun, Cybertron's star, just starts spewing a whole lot of solar flare activity, which even that much radiation is lethal to Transformers or Cybertronians. So there's a whole lot of surviving that needs to happen. The smaller and medium-sized bots go underground while the larger ones die, and then we go into a very long story. Well, not a very long story, but a story about the extinction of the Predacons to establish exactly how they died off from the planet in preparation for the Prime cartoon.
This all sounds like the plot of a really mediocre Doctor Who episode.
Anyway, Miguel, do you want to talk to us about what happened to the Predacons, if you can? I can't remember if the wiki has enough details on that.
Not really. It just kind of says that they die.
Yeah.
Although at the end of, like, at the last moments, Predaking sort of taps into a version of Stasis Lock, and that allows him and the other Predacons to preserve, I guess, like, some form of themselves, which I guess is how they allude to the, both there's the CNA, but also how in the Prime cartoon, the clone, or the eventual clone of Predaking remembers stuff from early on in, like, the ancient past.
Yeah, it's a bit of a workaround of that, but also we got to note it's a clone of a clone. No, wait, no, never mind. Predaking wouldn't be. He could just be a straight up one.
Well, no, he is a clone of the clone because the bones that they pick up on Cybertron,
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking too. Because we'll spoil this a little bit. A lot of the spoil, quote unquote. A lot of the third season features the Autobots and Decepticons looking for ancient Predacon bones on Earth because Megatron sent a squad of them to Earth in the ancient past.
But wait, the bones were on Cybertron, so how did they get to Earth?
Shockwave made clones of those bones, and then they were sent to Earth, and then they died off, so they were hunting for the bones of the clones.
The clone bones from the bone.
Clones of the clones of the Predacons.
Yes. So
they
were looking for the clone bones from the bone clones. Why am I laughing at this?
Yeah,
Transformers Prime, Clone Bone Hunters.
Yeah. That's not Beast Hunters, it's Clone Bone Hunters.
Clone Bone Hunters. I'm going to need to apologize for ruining this continuity again.
It's all good. Though what Miguel and I were getting onto was that Predaking actually was from Cybertron before that bone hunt started. So was he a clone of a clone? That's what we wondering.
He's the second. He's the second bone clone because they had to clone him from the first set of clone bones.
Yeah.
This is all gonna make no sense to anyone, and it's already starting to hurt my brain.
Yeah. So let's get back onto the main track, and while Miguel is right, like the more specific details that the book that the Covenant of Primus details about the extinction of the Predacons is not a whole lot. I'm just going to go over it briefly, just to kind of like describe the details and exactly what happened. So Predaking had his turf. Before I forget, speaking of that, before the whole Cataclysm event happened, the giant Predacons were there, and they're like, oh no, they may hunt the Cybertronians, and maybe our impacts will get in. Well, no. Predaking tried that once, and then Prima just came over and was like, hey, you, don't do that again. And even Predaking was like, maybe I don't want to mess with this one. Okay, I will not eat you bipedal ones ever again. That's an important part of the story, apparently.
And the dialogue went just like that. That is a direct direct pull from the book.
Yeah, everything we're saying is directly quoted from the Covenant of Primus. We're not changing a single word, including the sentence right here.
All the dialogue in the book is stilted and awkward.
Yeah. Anyway, so Predaking has his domain, and he has two Predacons that like he has kind of taken over the domain, and like he has them as like his main underlings. Twin Strike and Laserback, who are both toys from the toy line. And the main thing is they just start seeing the meteors rain down. Predaking is kind of like, I'm going to fight it, and then realizes, oh wait, maybe I can't fight it. I don't know what to do. I'm not used to being a runawayer guy.
I fight no space rocks. I'll die like a man.
Yeah, and
well,
then
what's a man?
Yeah,
I'm a robot.
Yeah, and then a few days, and then like they're trying to like keep their ecosystem in check. But then a few days later, they see some shriek bots flying in, and they're like, we are from the northern polar regions. We gotta run because the sun's going to kill us all. And then even Predaking sees in the distance that like, oh yeah, the sun is burning everything up. We are going to die. We are going to run. And the three of them run and fly for 2 days straight away from the sun.
You fools, you can't outrun the sun.
They did for 2 days. And then eventually they were about to give up, and then Predaking was like, oh wait, there's a cavern. There's a cavern system large enough for us, made by one of the meteors. We got to go to it. But the radiation was starting to affect the others, so they were starting to go mad, and then Predaking remembered, oh wait, stasis lock is a thing we can do. So he forces them into stasis lock, drags them into one of the caves, and then the caves collapse on them. And that's about what that is. So it's not really certain if like they perished at that time or if they remained alive for a period of time before being discovered by Shockwave.
All right.
Or they fossilized when they necessarily died. That's the main question.
Is that it for the age of evolution?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all the extinctioning that happened.
All right, great. Let's move on to the part I didn't read then.
Okay. Good to know. All right, so the next thing is Chapter 5, The Age of Origins. After a few thousand years, they say it's a few thousand years, which Alpha Trion notes in terms of galactic scales is very minuscule and mercifully short for them.
So it's like just waiting it out for a half hour.
Yeah, galactically speaking. And probably Cybertronian speakingly.
Cybertronian speakingly.
Me no good words.
These are all going to be quotes that need to be put on T-shirts. We need to make a merch shop. Someone talk to
You can write them down once we're done.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'll go back, listen to this, I'll pull some quotes. I'll talk to Eric.
Yeah. Anyway, so things that happen. The main thing that happens is, well, the extinction event is over. The species that survived are in smaller numbers, but start to come back to the surface. Miguel, do you want to say some stuff with this? Do you want to like tell us what's going on at the beginning of this, the Age of Origins?
I think you have it pretty good.
Okay,
so
I just
far.
want to make sure you get a chance to speak and I don't hog
No,
the show.
it's fine. You keep going.
Okay, so main thing that's going on once they awake, if I understand the book correctly, because I think it's a little unclear, but I think what happened was, while underground, there was a group of the bipedal Cybertronians that were like questioning, like, what did this? What higher power was responsible for this? Why would they do it to us? And they started actually asking all those existential questions. But rather than like creating a new religion or whatever, they kind of were like, maybe it isn't a higher power. Maybe it's just math. Maybe it's just what happens in the universe. So they started
Maybe we can't blame all our problems on Primus. Maybe we need to start blaming them on things that are really causing problems, like us not knowing how to math.
Yes. So to prevent math from not knowing math killing them again, they developed math. And this group was a very highly intellectual group, and they studied the stars and how they moved. And this group became known as the Patterners. And they were very much responsible for basically terraforming the surface of the world. For they mapped the stars and Cybertron and the rotation around its stars on the surface of Cybertron itself. Which is why when you see images of Cybertron, there's all those circles all over it. Because these Patterners created it. And from there, cities started to spring up. Civilizations started to arise, basically. Of note, the leader of this group was called Azimuth, who, as quoted by the wiki, came to study the true impartial movements of the cosmos in logic, mathematics, and pattern. So they inscribed the pattern of the stars in Cybertron in relation to them upon the planet. And of note, Perceptor and Reflector were among the Patterners. Because yeah. So everyone is old in this universe.
Everyone's old.
Everyone is incredibly old.
Yeah, that's fun. That's different. Have they done anything like that in other continuities other than in G1 when they were asleep for however many years because of the crash?
IDW's been pushing that a little bit with the revelation recently that RC is over 12 million years old.
Oh, I've not been keeping super up to date. I didn't know that.
Yeah. She was around for the War of the Primes in that universe, which were between 12 to 10 million years, I believe.
That's different, I guess.
Yeah. It's never been solidly established how old a Cybertronian can live, quote-unquote, can live, which is why the whole mortalist myth sprung about saying, oh, Cybertronians can't die of old age. Right.
Yeah, I've heard that being mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone's old. What else is there?
A note from the primes themselves was while everyone was under the surface, the high lead deposits and putting themselves into stasis allowed them to prevent most of the damage. However, their brains did get scattered a bit from the radiation. So a lot of the history from before the cataclysm was lost, even though most of them were there. Therefore, a lot of the history of the primes they knew became myths. And the remaining primes decided maybe that's a good idea. Let's just turn ourselves into myths and exacerbated the myths and hid all the artifacts and all of that stuff and just kind of bury themselves.
They just kind of left?
They didn't leave, but they kind of let's stop being here. Let's just fade into...
That's what leaving means.
Let's just fade into the background. Alpha Trion was still there.
Yeah, but that's because he's the space librarian. He always needs to be there.
That's very true.
To keep up the book.
Also, depending upon who you ask, Mikado, Alchemist Prime is still about, running a bar.
Yep. I would watch that. I would watch Space Cheers. Someone make this, please.
Someone did. It swerved. There's a group, side tangent. The Last Night Audio Theater, I love these guys. They are making stop motion shorts in regards to some of More Than Meets the Eye work, and one of them is called Swerves, which is basically Cheers except with the characters from More Than Meets the Eye.
Okay. You need to send me this. I need to see Space Cheers.
I will send you a link after we're done here.
All right, great.
Everyone else out there, you can look at it too after the podcast is over. Stay here for now.
Yeah, we need you.
Anyway,
without you, we don't exist. We're like the primes. We just fade to obscurity.
On track, please.
That was on track.
Oh, it was. It actually was. Anyway, so cities started to be developed. The main one was the intellectual center known as Iacon. A lot of thinkers, a lot of scholars went there, a lot of sciences developed. The Hall of Records was most notably developed. Alpha Trion was there for its opening ceremony and became its head. He watched Orion Pax a bit. He never really interacted with him, but just kind of kept pushing him towards people that would be hey, we know Vector Sigma. We talked to Vector Sigma. Let's work with Vector Sigma. But not directly.
I take it Vector Sigma will be important then.
Yeah, he was. Kind of, sort of. Anyway, yeah, he is definitely important in the Prime cartoon. But not the entirety of the planet was civilized at this point. There were still a lot of raiding groups, a lot of barbarians, vandals. Insecticons infested the wilderness areas, though the nature, quote unquote,
robot nature.
Yeah, the robotic nature kind of got pushed back from the developing cities, but there was still the nature. Insecticons most notably. And among the barbarian groups, Vandals, Breakers, and Ravagers were among them, but the most notable were the Wreckers. who apparently Bulkhead and Wheeljack were original members at this time.
Interesting. So they did things that were not so good?
Well, actually, they were kind of like the more noble warriors. They like protected the vulnerable and weak from the more marauders and pillaging groups.
Interesting.
Yeah. But from these wilds, we have a very notable bot that we got to talk about now. Ratchet. Ratchet comes onto this.
You gonna elaborate, or are you just gonna leave that long pause?
What were you saying? What about a long pause?
I was going to ask if you were going to elaborate on that, or if you were just going to leave in a really long pause.
No, I'll elaborate. I do want to just make sure I give you guys enough of a chance to talk about what you're thinking about this stuff that I've mentioned about the development and the rise of the civilization.
So far, it sounds very similar to Earth history, except big robots, and also the robot gods did exist and just kind of disappeared. Meanwhile, we have no idea what happened there.
Yeah.
Maybe there were robot gods on Earth. Maybe there were no gods. Who knows? We'll never know. Who cares?
That's true. That's true. According to the online question forum, Ask Vector Prime, it is technically canonical that the 13 visited Earth and were actually the Olympians of Greek mythology.
Oh, great. So something that I thought was something I should mention, that I thought, no, that would be too stupid to mention, don't bring it up, actually happened in canon.
It is canon. It's a very different set of the 13 from this one. For example, Mortalis is among the 13 in that continuity.
Wait, this is a different continuity? I thought this was aligned. Now I'm lost again.
Well, in one of the Ask Vector Prime universes, this doesn't affect Aligned. It affects Aligned as much as the Guiding Hand affects Aligned, which is not.
Great. Okay, so in some continuity, the Greek gods were the robot gods.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. To clear that
Miguel, care to comment on this nightmare cluster here?
I mean, this is what happens with Transformers, like, it's the multiverse stuff and the primes. It's all nonsense.
It's nonsense, but I love it.
We came to this conclusion last week when we decided that the War of the Primes was just high school drama.
Oh, totally. That entire and it's also kind of disturbing because in some respects you're like, they're sort of siblings. This isn't okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in some respects you're like, why did we start talking about Solus and Megatronus now? We could have saved this for 2 weeks later on Valentine's Day, which is the day we're going to be recording.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. These two come out on the Thursday, technically, I think. I'm not sure.
They come out, actually, depending on what time they get finished through with the editing, they come out like late night Wednesday. Okay, we're actually running low on time because I need to head out soon.
Yeah, but we are almost done. So, but before we keep moving on, Miguel, did you have any other things about like the rise of the civilization at this point?
I mean, it's interesting to see how the Covenant sort of lays out those, like, fills in those gaps, because typically, and as you'll see later on with the Covenant, it kind of goes into this history we typically know, which is like before the war, into the Great War, and then the stuff on Earth. But seeing these earlier bits of like early civilization is stuff that I really enjoy seeing, both here and in other continuities that explore it. So I'm not 100% on board with having a lot of like the characters we know having existed and be like influential members of society this early, like Perceptor and like Reflector being part of this early like top level class in Cybertronian society, and then it's like all the way forward. It's like, oh, they were important Autobots and Decepticons way later too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Which is why, like, there are some like new characters that are introduced here, but certainly
right, which is good to see. Like some of the leaders are like new characters that we like Azimuth being the one. It's like, oh, he was the first sort of astrologer. Yeah, a chief astrologer and mathematician and everything. That sort of like, you could even like bridge it as like, oh, he's one of the people who kind of like trained Perceptor and like led Perceptor, and then you'll see that later with some other characters that they introduce sort of their mentors.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was
not to cut this off because it is all very interesting, but we've got maybe 5 minutes before I have to head out.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot left to talk about, so I'll move along. Very, very, very minor thing that they do want us to know, apparently, was that the Patner faction did splinter into different groups. One of them was called Random. It was led by Galvatron, and he went mad, and they were like starting taking radioactive drugs, and then he killed off most of the faction, and then like he tried to continue on the Random faction, but less extreme.
So then this is one of those continuities where Megatron isn't Galvatron.
Yes.
All right.
Just a note. I don't think it's any important anywhere else. It's just a note.
All right.
But anyway, Ratchet goes to Iacon. He studies medicine under Chief of Surgery Remedy. And then a little bit after that, he's practiced. He's gotten skills. And then he has to deal with a patient. A very interesting patient. A bot by the name of Cold Welder, who claims he was abducted by aliens. How ridiculous is that?
I'm pretty sure this was an episode of the X-Files.
Isn't every episode of the X-Files about getting abducted by aliens or something?
No, sometimes they track down Bigfoot and it's just some hairy woman and her kids.
Anyway.
Sometimes it's tree demons. I'm not making this up. I'm pretty sure most, if not all of this, was in the first season.
Okay. That makes me want to watch the X-Files list. But anyway, so Ratchet is like, he's going to take care of the patient. He doesn't believe him, but then he scans him like, wait, there is something in your head. So then he extracts it, and then he gets other chief medic, Dr. Cogwheel, who is apparently an arachnicon like Arachnid.
These are all great names, by the way.
They are amazing names.
I don't know how good of a name is Random.
Well, that's the name of the faction.
That's still a name, and it's not a good one.
No.
Yeah, but, I mean, still though. Coal Welder,
Cogwheel.
whatever the other one was.
Remedy.
Cogwheel, these names.
Remedy, all these wonderful names. Anyway, so then Dr. Cogwheel and Ratchet are kind of like, what is this? And they just know it receives and transmits information, but they don't know to who. And then they're like, wait, we're starting to develop society. We don't have an actual solid leader besides a couple hundred or even 1,000 some warlords and war kings and whatnot. And they're like, who do we tell this to? And then they don't have a chance to figure out because, boom, it's time for the Quintesson to invade.
Woohoo!
And they do, and there's a little bit of invasion discussion going on. It's not like a forced invasion, but they come proclaiming, hey, you are not alone in the universe. We have seen your progress, and we want to welcome you to the intergalactic community. Also, we come bearing gifts. We are going to bestow upon the chosen some the ability to transform.
Okay.
Since
question: are there still weird tentacle monsters in this continuity?
They are still weird tentacle monsters.
All
They're
right, great. Every
more
continuity
humanoid.
needs weird tentacle monsters.
According to the pictures that we see, they are slightly more humanoid, but they are still tentacle monsters.
Yeah, that's great. That's what every continuity needs. Just tentacle monsters.
Yeah.
Don't care what the context is.
Yeah.
Tentacle monsters.
Yeah, but the main thing is since the Cybertronian race was unaware they were able to transform themselves, yet somehow the Quintessons knew of this, they were able to dupe the entirety of Cybertron into becoming their slaves, even becoming their transport, because apparently also the Quintessons were small enough to fit inside the Transformers' cockpits.
Interesting. I'm guessing they knew that because of Brain Chip and Coal Welder.
Possibly. That's possibly. It is also worth noting, as we mentioned in the last episode, that Quintus Prime was responsible for creating the Quintessons with his Ember Stone.
Yep.
Alpha Trion definitely notes this, to just make sure the connection and the homage is clear.
Yeah. For anyone who didn't get the Quintus created the Quintessons.
Yeah.
Because, having the names be super similar isn't clear enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So,
and the only other thing of note is that before the Quintessons bestowed upon them the gift of transforming, Alpha Trion was trying to be like, guys, let's not listen to them. And then after they were given the gift to transform, most bots were like, anyone that betrays the Quintessons or says anything bad about the Quintessons is a filthy liar and must be put to death, or something like that, something that extreme.
I think this was an episode of Futurama. Everything here has probably been done on some TV show.
I'm sure everything has been done somewhere else before.
Yeah. How much do you want to bet we're not the only ones who have ever called the Aligned Continuity high school drama?
Well, we're probably the only ones to say it on the internet in a video podcast.
Maybe. I'll give us that. We did do something slightly different.
Yes.
All right.
But that is the end of Chapter 5. The Quintesson invasion has begun and has happened. And that will lead into Chapter 6, The Age of Wrath, which will be discussed next week. But before we close off, Miguel and Zeus, you have any comments about Ratchet dealing with crazy tinfoil wearing hack conspiracy theorists that are actually proven right, and how the invasion went?
I think that we should take away from this that every conspiracy theorist should be believed. Every single one of them. You know, lizards are in the government. 9/11 was an inside job.
The Earth
Something
is flat?
else. I can only think of 2 big conspiracy theories off the top of my head.
Anyway.
All I can do is apologize to Eric in advance for this episode.
That's not John Miguel.
I do too, Miguel. I do too.
Yeah, so I'd like to give an apology to Eric. I'd like to give an apology to everyone listening. I'd like to give an apology to the creators of the Aligned continuity. Most of all, I'd like to apologize to you, SoundJack, and you, Miguel, for having to deal with me in this real-world conversation that's taking place over Skype.
It's all good. But are there any final thoughts to wrap up this discussion of Chapter 5 and this section of the Covenant of Primus? Any genuine thoughts, non-sidetracking thoughts, any genuine thoughts about the content?
I do like the just serious at this point that they do start introducing sort of like we're getting sort of a almost like fused history of the Transformers, because now they're introducing the Quintessons and giving them sort of like, oh, they're really familiar with Cybertronian biology. They were an oppressive force, as you'll see later in the Covenant, to the Cybertronians, and spoiler, intending to sell them off as slave labor. So you're seeing a sort of merging of the Primus creation myth along with the Quintesson one, which in some respects had been done before in the 3H Wreckers comics, sort of for the early stages of BotCon and the OFTCC, where they merged.
I couldn't remember if it was that or if it was Dreamwave who did the merge.
No, it was the convention comics. They sort of did a blending, saying how the Quintessons had like hijacked Vector Sigma and everything to like force Cybertron to create Cybertronians, but in the end it really still was Primus and Unicron at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty much out of time, so we should try to wrap this up soon, I think.
Yes. I admittedly do not have much else to say besides what Miguel has said. This section, the main things about these sections are the adding details of gaps we had in continuities before, and also trying to merge the previous continuities into one continuity, which is the purpose of the Aligned continuity, to merge everything else into one cohesive story that is separate from everything else but references everything else, which is very nice. Very nice to like get both the Primus and the Quintessons together and explained and all of that good stuff. And unless Zeus has any other final comments about this, I think we're good. Zeus, do you have anything?
Yeah, I've got nothing else. I've got no more words.
All right. So, as we said, this was Chapter 4 and 5 of the Covenant of Primus. Next week, we'll be talking about Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. So, please come back for that. Social medias. Miguel, go.
I can be found on Twitter at Logos Minor.
Zeus.
You can find me on Twitter at _Zeus. That's the full word, _ spelled out. You can find me on Instagram at pcm.exe. I'm not posting a ton, but when I do, it's about a 50-50 chance of it being something Transformers or something Lego, because that's another one of my hobbies. You can find me on YouTube at PCM Reviews, where I am officially, at this point, maybe not working on that review of Power of the Primes Optimus. I'll get around to doing something with my channel at some point, but at this point, I've done very little, and it's been about a month since I've uploaded.
Nice. As for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all at SoundJack426 on Twitter. You That's going to be basically where I hang out, so you can message me or something or whatever. Instagram has a lot of photos of video of toys I've reviewed. And my YouTube predominantly is currently reviews. I'm trying to do different things. I just did a review of Titan's Return Blaster. I finally getting to the Leaders of the Titan's Return line. Soundwave will be up the day this goes out, basically. And already posted is a discussion of my other main thing on my channel, my SoundJack's Rambles, where I talk about various nerd things. And this week's conversation is about the Titan's Return cartoon that I have with Eric and Alyssa, who is from my channel.
Oh yeah, everyone's favorite cartoon, the Titan's Return cartoon.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's why you should all go watch that after you finish watching this, and after you finish watching the Swerves by the Audio Nights Theater. You gotta watch those. But besides all of our personal social medias, this podcast is part of the Nerdy Geek Talk channel. You can follow that on Twitter at Nerdy Geek Talk. You should also subscribe to us to keep up to date with all of our other podcasts. Besides this Misaligned podcast, we have a sister podcast called TF Primecast, led by Eric, which usually comes out the day after, which specifically goes over episodes of the Prime cartoon. There is also the Nerdy Geek, not the Nerdy Geek Bots, the Steel City Bots podcast, which myself and Eric are on, which is basically a Transformers news podcast and a Transformers Hangout podcast.
I've also been on 2 episodes of that, and I think they're arguably some of the worst episodes.
Don't sell yourself so short.
The one with Diecast. The one with Diecast that's the first one I was on. That one's probably pretty good. But
yeah.
The second one, I think I derailed it way too much, as I tend to do.
Yeah. And then we there's also Holocron Herald, which talks about Star Wars. So we're not just Transformers on here.
And then there's also Asylum.
Yeah, and also
which is the show that Aaron is on.
Yes, that also Asylum too, which is about the comic books. Also, I can't remember everything, but I know Eric has set it up so that we are on a lot of streaming sites, basically, where like the podcast, where you can like listen to podcasts.
Yeah, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher. I think there was something else, but those are the I remember him saying all the time.
If you listen to if there's a place you listen to podcasts, we are probably there. It's all going to be under Nerdy Geek Talk. But I think, but you can also find everything on our YouTube channel. So again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to keep updated on this podcast or any other podcast. And also please like, share, and subscribe this video because that's good for us and good to let other people know about this series and all the other series. Yeah, that's all we got to say tonight. Thank you for tuning in. And
I would just like to once again apologize, as is routine now.
Yeah, it's a routine. We might as well just end the episode and you're apologizing just into like, all right, this is us and we apologize for this mess of a show.
Yep.
Nah. But genuinely, seriously, thank you for tuning in. Have a good night out there, folks. Bye.